So, when you don't know how to do something, how to fix something, or how something works, what do? Ask a teacher? Ask your parents? Ask your friends? Ask someone you really know and trust? No! You go to the internet and ask some randos. But I'm not talking about creeps here, I hope. No, I mean the people of the internet! You know, those people who make how-to videos. Because chances are, if you're trying to figure out something, someone on the internet has already figured it out for you. Things like, how do I unsend a text? No. How do I do a winged eyeliner? How do I get rid of the zit by Friday night? How do I get out of gym class? How do I screen cap Snapchat without getting caught? They'll never know. But then there are things in life that don't have an easy fix, that don't have a simple solution, that don't have a how-to video. Things like what to do when you have problems with family, or when it seems like you have no control in your life, or what to do when someone has done something to you. I mean, clearly, they gotta go. The truth is, there's a lot of life that doesn't have a solution you can just find online. So how do you know what to do when you don't know what to do?
Let's start with a question. What are some of your all-time favorite movies or stories? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what they are. For me personally, I love The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series. Those are just fantastic stories with great characters and lots of drama and build-up and hype and all that. And it's fun stuff. And you know, Harry Potter probably comes in a close second, but I think the Lord of the Rings stuff takes the cake for me. You know, I've read the books multiple times. I've seen all of the movies in theaters, and I actually own them too. And I own for the Lord of the Rings stuff, I own the extended version with 45 minutes of extra bonus footage on top of the already really long theatrical version. So I love them. One thing that makes a movie great is how much we like the main characters, right? For Frodo and Sam, or Harry, Ron, and Hermione, they're lovable underdogs that they're not perfect, you know, but they do overcome all odds. And producers and storytellers create these kinds of characters that we can get attached to by giving us a deeper look at both the good and the bad in those characters. We see both sides, and that helps us feel for them, right? It helps us actually care about what happens to them, and it helps us identify with them. Movies show us some of what happens in a character's life by creating a backstory, which is a way of letting us know some things that have happened to the character before the current moment that we're viewing them in the movie. For example, maybe the movie centers around a dad saving his daughter, right? But the backstory shows us that their relationship had a lot of brokenness in the past. Or maybe the movie centers around a superhero defeating his arch nemesis. But we discover that they used to be great friends before something happened that fractured their relationship. So understanding the backstory helps make a more complex, a more interesting, and a more compelling story. But sometimes introducing these things can kind of seem random, right? It's like when the dad is in the middle of a chase to find his daughter's kidnappers, and suddenly the movie flashes back to a scene where he and his daughters are arguing in the kitchen. You want to be like, wait, what's going on here? Well, what does this have to do with the chase scene? And chances are you've also felt that way just living your own life, right? They are the moments in our life stories that make us ask the same questions of what's happening here? What's the point of going through this? What I'm talking about here is difficulties. Pain, struggle, problems, trials, hardships. The things that will be part of our backstory one day, but for now, they're in our current story. And when we're in the middle of them, it's rough. For the past few weeks, we've been talking about this question. What do you do when you don't know what to do? And today we're going to talk about what to do in these difficulties that we face. For example, what do we do when people make fun of you? Or when someone you love gets really sick? Or when your parent loses a job? When a friend dies? When your learning disability makes everything more difficult? When your parents' divorce is just killing you inside? When your anxiety is crippling? or when your self-harm habit gets out of control. In other words, it's the heavy stuff, the painful stuff, the real life stuff. And before we can even ask the question of what do I do in these situations, we often find ourselves asking why. Why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? And why is this happening right now? And just like a movie that flashes back to a scene that doesn't seem to make any sense at the moment, difficulties can make us feel the same way. Difficulties often feel random, pointless, and unnecessary. Now, sometimes, to be fair, we do see the point after the fact, right? When it's part of our backstory. For example, you may have a broken friendship. But looking back on that friendship, you realize that friendship really put you in some hard spots and kind of made you make some bad choices, right? And that version of yourself wasn't someone that you really liked. So even though it wasn't easy at the time, you now see that it may have been good for you, actually. There are also times where we do see the point in the moment, right? While the difficulties are happening. For example, maybe you found yourself struggling in a class, right? And it was on you. It was because you weren't putting in the work. Your teacher called you out on it and maybe even got your parents involved, and so you started working hard, right? You started to bring your grade up. And it wasn't fun, but it was for the best. Now, it's nice when that happens, right? But most of the time, things that don't feel good seem pointless. And we've all had an experience that hurts and feels pointless in the moment. Whether it was not making a team, not getting the part in the musical, going through drama with family and friends. We've all asked ourselves, why me, when we go through those difficult situations? And to be honest, in my experience, there's usually not many good answers in the moment. In real life, unlike in many movies, our difficult circumstances usually don't get a pretty bow tied on them as we walk through them. The outcome may not turn out how we want it to. And in those times, it can be really hard for us to see any purpose in our pain, to find any hope in our hurt, and to find the determination to keep going despite the difficulties. But when we find life confusing or difficult, we can learn what to do by looking at other people who have been through similar situations, or at least some other difficulties, right? And that brings us back to the story of Joseph. Now, we've been looking at some of the events in Joseph's life, right, the last several weeks, and the account of his journey is found in the book of Genesis in the Bible, which basically means he lived long before Jesus. So here's a quick recap. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers. Yikes, right? That's not cool. And then he was taken to a foreign country, Egypt, where he was forced to work for a high-powered official. While working for this official, he was falsely accused of doing something he didn't do, and he was thrown into prison for it. Now, from free man to slave to prisoner, if anyone had earned the right to ask, what's the point? Why is all of this happening to me? It was Joseph. And that's where we pick up. Joseph is in jail for a crime he didn't commit. And here he makes some new friends, if you can call them friends. Check it out. In Genesis chapter 40, verse 1 through 3, it says, "Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined." So Pharaoh, being Pharaoh, he was the boss of all Egypt, and he had all power. So if he got mad at you and wanted to throw you in prison, that's where you'd go, even if you hadn't done anything illegal. And that's what happened to these two guys. They were thrown in prison with Joseph, just for doing something to upset Pharaoh. And the story continues in verses 4 through 8. After they had been in custody for some time, each of these two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Now, there's a lot going on here. Remember, Joseph is in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And even in this really difficult situation, Joseph still honors God. And that's just amazing. And so the men told Joseph their dreams. And with God's help, Joseph told them what they meant. And then, what Joseph said would happen actually happened. Based on the dream that the chief cupbearer had, Joseph said he would be restored to a favorable position in Pharaoh's court, his officials, as one of his officials. And he was. As for the chief baker, Joseph said he would not have the same luck. And he didn't. We don't have time to get into the whole story here, so go and read it yourself in Genesis chapters 40 and 41. It's worth it. You would think that given what Joseph had done to help the cupbearer out, it would have made sense for the cupbearer to speak up and say, "Hey, Mr. Pharaoh, thank you for restoring me to this position, but I wouldn't be here without Joseph. And he actually told me about a dream that I had and interpreted it for me. And so, he might be someone you want to get on staff because I know you have dreams too, right?" But that's not what happened. The story tells us that the cupbearer forgot about Joseph. He got out of jail and went on with his life. Ouch. Sorry, Joseph. But over time, as Joseph was waiting in jail for the cupbearer to remember him, he realized that not only did he forget him, but what he did to help the cupbearer didn't help his own situation. It didn't get him out of jail. And I bet he was tempted to wonder, what was the point of all that? It didn't help my life get any better at all. Was it worth it? Should I have done it? Has God forgotten about me? I thought I did what was right, and here I am, still sitting in jail. But then, 2 years later, yes, 2 years, Pharaoh had 2 dreams that troubled him. He desperately searched for someone on his staff who could interpret the dreams. But part of the issue was that he didn't want just lip service from his officials. He wanted to know that it was actually a good interpretation. So he didn't tell them the dreams. Rather, he insisted that the officials tell him his own dreams and then interpret them. Who could do that? And that is when the cupbearer remembered Joseph. So Pharaoh called for Joseph, who, with God's insight and wisdom, told Pharaoh what his dreams were and interpreted them with incredible accuracy. And as a result, Joseph was made second in charge of all of Egypt. Only Pharaoh was over him. And under Joseph's leadership, Egypt survived a terrible famine, which eventually put Egypt in a position to save Joseph's family from his homeland, who were suffering from the same famine. But let's go back a little bit. It was 2 full years before the cupbearer even remembered Joseph. And even when Joseph was promoted to a position of incredible power, he was still living in a foreign land. So it wasn't like Joseph was able to go home as a free man. And Joseph was still second in command under Pharaoh, which meant that if Pharaoh was having a bad day and he decided he wanted Joseph dead or back in prison, he could just snap his fingers and make it happen. So no, this did not make Joseph's life perfect. Not even close, actually. But when we see the big picture and understand the context to his backstory, we see that Joseph's challenging circumstances uniquely positioned him to do something great. Joseph still had that 2 years, right, that he had to wait. And all the good things that happened in his world didn't make those bad things okay. Being promoted to second in command didn't undo the challenges that he faced leading up to that. But at the same time, Joseph's difficult circumstances positioned him and prepared him for something great, something only he could do. And I think this is something we can pull out of Joseph's story for us today. Hard things can happen in your life. They will happen, if they haven't already. And it's important to remember that just because something happens doesn't mean it was something that God did to you or that he wants for you. And because of sin, things happen that aren't right, that aren't fair, that don't make sense. People hurt each other and they create systems of hurt. But when it seems like it's impossible for anything good to come out of these situations, remember, God is really good at doing the impossible. Check this out. In Romans 8:28, Paul writes, And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Now, it may not seem to make things all better, and it may not even make sense yet, but God is in the business of taking our hurt, difficulties, and pain and redeeming them, bringing good from them. And that means even if it was done in evil and meant for evil in our lives, God can use it for good. Not only for us, but for others too. In other words, when you don't know what to do, remember that your problems can position you for a purpose. This doesn't mean we can tie a bow on every bad thing. It doesn't mean everything will be fixed and go back to being how it was before the bad stuff happened. It just means that we can leave room for God to tell a new story in our hard circumstances. It means we can have confidence in God's ability to redeem things, to know that good can come from bad. It means the hardest and worst things we experience aren't the end of our story. In fact, they could be part of something more. So when we go through pain and we can't see the purpose yet, here are some things that can help us get a bigger perspective. First, remember that no one else has your life story. Your difficult circumstances, they're not fun, but they are unique to you. They put you in a position to learn, grow, and discover things no one else can. They are opportunities to grow your character and experience. I mean, think of those 2 additional years Joseph spent in jail after helping the cupbearer. What did he learn? How was his character developed in that time? God is using your tough stuff in ways you can't even imagine because they have shaped you in ways that no one else has been shaped. And that may not make it easier, I understand that, but it may give you a perspective or a way to see it differently. It may help you do the next right thing, just like we talked about last week. So secondly, remember that your story can interact with others. Although no one else has your life story, many people do face similar circumstances, and you could be a voice to help them through their own challenges and pain. A help that you would not have been able to provide if you hadn't gone through those things yourself. So, when you go through family drama, you can help people who are going through family drama. When you deal with a sickness, illness, or injury, you can encourage people who are going through the same thing. When you have big doubts and questions about your faith, you can be a safe place to talk about those questions and things for people who are asking those same questions. You can become a person who looks around you, sees other people's struggles, and can help them. And we have a team of people here at Moses Lake Alliance Church that want to be that for you. Okay, we have people who have lived life, who have been through hard things, and that's part of their backstory now, right? And so we want to be here for you as the things you're going through are part of your current story. So we would love it if you reach out to us, connect with us, and let us know how we can come alongside you. We'd love to talk. The links are in the description for how to get a hold of us, so don't hesitate to do that if you'd like to. Third thing is remember that your story is part of God's bigger story. Joseph went through pain that felt pointless in the moment. But when we see his backstory, we see that God used his problems and positioned him for a purpose. God took his impossibly bad situation and used it to create unimaginable good down the road. And we'll talk more about that next week, but for now, know God could do the same with you. When we surrender to God, our story can be part of what God is doing on a much larger scale. And what if God used your painful situation to position you for something amazing that you haven't even imagined yet? And what if the first step is simply asking him for help, trusting that God is able to bring good from your hard situations? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.